All right, so we're live on YouTuber, right? Do a sound check. Okay, so Nick, microphone needs to be straight up and down. The cardioid pattern is actually this side of it. So bring it up a little bit so you're talking. There you go.
Pretty good.
That ought to get it done. Is it going to stay put on you?
I think so.
I need better mics and better arms. Better boom arms.
I think that's good. Yeah.
All right, we're ready. Chris, do a sound check.
Test. All right.
Yeah. All right, I'm ready to go whenever you are. So have you ever seen Evan do his 3, 2, 1?
Mm-hmm.
He goes 3, 2, and then launches.
All right.
So whenever you're ready.
All right, Chris. Whenever are you good to go?
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Malcolm, you good? All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, Tech fans, and welcome to episode 140 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, coming to you today from TSL's High Tech Studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. On Saturday, the Hokies gave up 600 yards in a 56-45 loss to UNC. Now, what does this all mean? We'll break it down to you coming up next on the Tech Sideline Podcast. Welcome back to the Tech Sideline Podcast. Whether you're watching live or archived on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher, we are so glad that you could join us today as we record Monday, October 12th. Our crew today, we have our General Manager and Founder, Will Stewart, Managing Editor, Chris Coleman, and the top producer in the USA, Malcolm Stewart, who is taking your questions on YouTube Live for the end of the show. And I am your podcast host today, replacing Evan Hughes for the day. It's great to have you with us. As always, the Tech Sideline Podcast is brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. This week and every week, this Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by the Fisher Law Firm, Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm, dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. The Fisher Law Firm handles cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. To date, the firm has defended tens of thousands of people charged with moving violations. For a free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll-free at 1-800-680-7031, or email the Fisher Law Firm at info@fisherlegal.com. Well, a rainy day. Hurricane still having its effects here in Blacksburg. How are you all doing today?
I'm good. Normal day.
I'm good. Got a couple of house cleaning items to go through. First of all, well done reading the intro, but you never told us your name. Do you realize that?
I think you did.
I thought I said I'm your
podcast he introduced us first and then came back and said, and I am your podcast host.
But did he say Nick Brown?
I'm pretty sure.
Well, I'm Nick Brown if I didn't say that earlier.
We'll have to watch the tape and review.
Anyway, this is freshman Nick Brown. He's in Bill Ross Sports Media and Analytics program, and we've been meaning to rotate some of the students into hosting the podcast. So welcome, Nick. It is really hard to get Evan to let go of the reins. He really likes doing the podcast, and I finally told him, Evan, you need to take a seat on the bench. We need to let somebody else do this.
Yeah, we got to get the backups ready for after you graduate.
We do, man.
Yeah. I mean, those freshmen got to become sophomores at some point.
He gets this hurt look on his face whenever I start talking about the future. He's kind of like that girl, you're going to break up with someday, but she doesn't want to hear it, So anyway, Nick is from Radford, so that's why it's always, we always have to discuss we don't have to discuss what I'm wearing on the podcast, but today we will. I'm sporting a Radford High School t-shirt, the black and gold of the Bobcats, and I haven't gotten to wear it this fall because there have been no cross-country meets. Not that my kids are all graduated from high school, but so I used to wear this during cross-country meets in the fall and going to football games and things like that, and I have not put this shirt on in months, so I appreciate the opportunity to to put on the, what is it called? Is it called Old Gold?
Yeah, I think it's old gold and just good old black.
So it's funny, Tech fans get they get in these discussions about uniforms and how they hate orange. And I go to see Radford High School football games, and the black uniforms are always very cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry if you're a Radford guy, Nick, whoever else. It's just not a gold that I really like. So it's kind of a washed out gold. I think it's good as an accent color, but not a main color. So a couple other house cleaning items. Let's see. I think in the last podcast, I forgot to include a link to the cool banner that's hanging over my shoulder from Campus Emporium. So I'll try to remember to put that in the description of this week's YouTube video. So I'll try to get that taken care of. And we need some help from folks who are listening. We got some comments on the last podcast that Chris was coming across a little hot, a little loud. And that's Chris's phone ringing right at the moment. We'll get it. Don't worry about it.
Not important.
So we got news that Chris was coming in a little loud, so we're working on the volume of his microphone for this podcast. So, if you're listening live, go ahead and give us feedback on how everybody sounds. That's when we really need the feedback, is when we're actually doing the recording. So all that said, let's get down to discussing that debacle on Saturday.
Yeah, UNC putting up 600 yards on the Hokies defense.
656 to be exact.
There's a lot. And the Hokies defense giving up 56 points. There's a lot of reasons going into this of why there's over 600 yards and over 50 points, but what stuck out to you the most? Was it coaching Justin Hamilton's first game, calling plays, or COVID affecting 15 players missing instead, including 4 safeties?
Well, it certainly wasn't Hamilton. I think that there's kind of 3 different things at play. I think up front, particularly at defensive tackle, I don't think Tech has the personnel to run this type of scheme, at least not against an offense the caliber of North Carolina. Duke gashed Tech up the middle in the run in the second half. We all saw it.
And NC State
did it to a certain extent. They couldn't do it as much because Tech was up 3 scores the whole game. So the warning signs were there for anybody who wanted to see them. As we know, the more games you play, the more film is out there, the more evidence gathers that, UNC watch those first 2 tapes and they're like, man, Tech is weak up front, and they took advantage of that. That's not an overnight fix. I think at linebacker, Tech lacks athleticism. It certainly doesn't help Rayshard Ashby when defensive tackles that aren't really suited for the scheme are getting pushed back into him. But he's a guy that needs to be in the absolute right situation to be really effective.
He's a downhill player.
And he's not in shape right now. Because he missed so much time in the preseason, and Dax just hasn't lived up to the hype.
You hear Chris picking his words. I mean, we love Dax.
Yeah.
And I think that Dax got better as the year went on last year.
He did.
I think he's regressed.
He seems to have. Tisdale has lost 10 pounds between his freshman and sophomore year, and now can't tackle anyone. Think about it. Caleb Farley was about the same size as a cornerback that Tisdale is as an inside linebacker.
Right.
I mean, that's insane to think about. Big issues, in the secondary. I'll just go ahead and read Fuente's quote about the safeties yesterday.
Yeah, this is and this is going to segue into some stuff I've got to say too. So go ahead.
You've got Diablo, Jenkins, and Shamori Connor out. We lost Nasir Peoples in fall camp. Devin Hunter is out. And you've got Nadir Thompson going in there at whip, who's been out all fall camp but played last week at corner. You throw him in there. Nike Hawkins has been out for all fall camp. We couldn't get the corners ready all week to go play safety because we didn't have most of them. Like some of those corners that were out for the Duke game didn't return until midweek, I suppose.
Yep.
The worst thing a coach can do is get up here and give a bunch of excuses. It's still our job to find a way to get the job done, but there comes a point where you don't feel like you're giving your guys a chance because there's nobody left. We put Jermaine Waller in there at nickel, and he's playing with one arm. He goes down, and everybody's booing because they think he's trying to slow the offense down, but he's the only one left. There was another one in here. Yeah, okay.
And again, this is Justin Puente talking after the game.
We were better at corner this week, health-wise, but some of those guys hadn't practiced, and we couldn't get anyone else in there to play safety, so we ended up putting Tisdale in there. So in the middle of a football game, they actually put linebacker Alan Tisdale at safety, and he's never even played the position, right? Or he played it in high school. Hasn't played it in a game at all. So, you can't just switch guys' positions in the middle of the game and expect success, right? So I think it's just a combination of everything. I think guys playing out of position. I think there's certain areas up front where they have guys that aren't necessarily a fit for any scheme except for the one that Tech ran under Bud Foster and Charlie Wiles. Lots and lots of injuries and COVID-related stuff in the secondary. I also don't know that they've installed the entire defense yet. They obviously didn't have spring to install it. The program got shut down a couple of times in the preseason. I mean, the defensive coordinator was out for 2 weeks. Other defensive coaches were out for multiple weeks. And even if you had all the coaches there the whole time, I mean, as much as half the team was out at one point for various reasons, right? So even if you install, let's say you want to spend 1 week installing a certain package on defense, okay, you do it, but half your defense isn't even there. You get them back you get that half back the next week, and you have to do it all over again, right? So they were behind from having no spring practice, not installing a new scheme to begin with, and they gave them extra time. Obviously, everybody had a longer preseason this year, but that doesn't do you any good if half your team is out, if part of your coaches are out. So I don't know. It's possible, maybe even probable, that they don't even have everything installed yet, which would be understandable. So I just think there's a multitude of reasons. Throw in the fact that Carolina's really, really good, offensively at least.
Yeah, they finally hit their rhythm.
It's kind of the perfect storm, and I think Fuente knew that was coming. You know why I say that is because they did the pooch punt on the very first drive of the game.
The quick kick.
The quick kick with Burmeister, and that's not something you do if you trust your defense, right? So they lined up out there. It was actually really well done. I think the idea was, you can get Mac Brown to burn an early timeout. So if UNC has the ball last in the first half, that's one less timeout they have, and then we have an opportunity to get a huge field position advantage, and it worked. Burmeister did a really good job with it.
That wound up being a 51-yard punt.
Yeah, it rolled inside the 20.
And punting's not an easy thing.
It's not. So that was brilliantly executed and called and everything like that. But the reason they did it is because he knew we weren't going to be able to stop him.
And it didn't matter
He
one
knew
bit.
from the very beginning that we were not going to be able to stop him.
Yeah.
And if you go back in time and look at that decision to do that pooch punt right there, I think that's an indicator that Fuente knew that was going to be a long day defensively.
Yeah. So that's Chris holding court for somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, and I could probably go 15 minutes. So they start talking to Fuente after the game, and he homes in on the safety issues, and I have a couple things to say about that. I'll talk about that a little bit in my Monday article that I'm going to wrap up after the podcast. There's a highlight video that the ACC Digital Network produced of Michael Carter and Javonte Williams in some of their runs. And if you go and you watch just that highlight clip, which is only about 4, 5, 6 plays, you see Tyler Matheny coming up to fill the hole and missing tackles or getting just beat. And if you look, and I'll put this in my article, there are 3 plays where if Matheny makes the play, it prevents an additional 90 yards of rushing. So you give up 656 yards. If Divine Diablo's in there and he makes those tackles, you're immediately reduced to 566 yards.
That's not very many.
That's just but they're when you start just making a few plays here and there on the back end of the defense, those hideous point totals and yardage totals start to go down. Not certainly 500 and some isn't reasonable either, but and so there is some truth to what he says. I thought Jermaine Waller actually played pretty well.
He did.
All that said, I've watched the conversation among Tech fans ever since the game, and it has been there's a group of Tech fans that say, we were missing 15 guys, you just can't expect to do well. And then there's the group of fans that says, yes, but the front seven was getting whipped. And I think the entire front seven was there, to my knowledge,
except for Zion DeBose, who's a backup defense.
Yeah,
and Deshaun Crawford.
Yeah, and so, for example, yes, you are correct. The defensive tackles were at points at getting pushed into the linebackers, but I also there was just a weird play early on where UNC ran up the middle. And this was before it was early on. So, and the defensive tackles held their ground, and Rayshard Ashby went charging up to the line of scrimmage and engaged the center. And I don't know who the running back was. It was probably Carter. Just went off guard, off tackle, and ran right by him. So, yes, it is true that the D tackles are often getting pushed back into the second level, or they're not occupying blockers who are getting into the second level. But we also just saw a lot of bad angles, bad reads, and things like that from the linebackers. And there's a stat in my article today. Rayshard Ashby did not show up in the tackle statistics in the first quarter. I believe when he made his first tackle, it was on UNC's 33rd play from scrimmage.
He was the second lowest grader on PFF on the defense, like a 33 out of 100.
And those are preliminary grades, but still.
But yeah.
And that tackle, which was made on UNC's 33rd play, was 27 yards downfield. So that's the kind of day the linebackers had. If you look, Tyler Matheny led the team in tackles with 10.
Right.
But I just detailed 3 plays where if he'd made them, that'd have been 3 more tackles, and it would cut way down on UNC's rushing totals. So it's, I don't want to sound this way, but about the only positive thing I can say about the defense is I was impressed with Norrell Pollard. Pollard, I think, had 6 tackles. He was the only D lineman over 2 tackles. And he had a couple of tackles, and he may have had more. He had a couple of tackles that were 18 yards downfield on the sideline and 29 yards downfield close to the sideline. That guy was hustling. And I'll make the crack in my article later today. It's almost like he's auditioning for defensive end.
Yeah.
But, I don't know that that's a possibility. You sit here and you talk about. So one point that Chris made in his Sunday article is that if you go back to, I think it was 2017, you've got Tim Settle and Ricky Walker in the middle, and those are big dudes. Those were NFL-sized defensive tackles that whatever Tech is doing schematically would have been better suited for it at this point in time, I think. But, if you want to talk about Norrell Pollard moving to defensive end, and smart guys have said that, Brandon Patterson said that. Not only does Virginia Tech need more bodies at defensive tackle now, to my knowledge, they have 0 defensive tackle commits in the current recruiting class. This is getting scary. They'll get better, as to your point. Once they practice the scheme more and work on things, they will get better. But there's not a lot of help, and Deshaun Crawford's out. I don't know when we're ever going to see Deshaun Crawford again. Jaden Cunningham, I don't think is ever going to play a down for Tech.
We don't even know that Crawford's like those other guys. We don't know if he can play in this scheme or not. He's 6 foot, 290 pounds.
Well, okay, so he's not a real big guy either. But he's strong and high energy.
Fuga and Jaden Cunningham are the 2 guys who are. And Fuga was our highest grading defensive tackle yesterday.
And that makes sense from what I watched.
Right. Yeah. Definitely the highest grader for sure. I think he's the best physical fit. Hopefully, maybe one day Jaden Cunningham will be healthy. But, last year, and I think I put this in my article yesterday, but Norrell Pollard and Jared Hewitt combined for 5 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks against UNC last year. And they were a big reason why Virginia Tech won that game. And then last year, they didn't even come close. Saturday, they didn't even come close to getting in the backfield, and were going backwards a lot. Hewitt, I think, was the I don't know if I think he was the second lowest grader at defensive tackle. But I mean, he's 280 pounds, and I think this scheme requires at least one of those defensive tackles to be able to occupy a double team, and neither one of those guys are big enough to do that.
I've seen Fuga do that at times, but you're right.
Right, and we're not criticizing these guys. It's not their fault. They were good players in Tech's scheme. Like, we all were really excited about Norrell Pollard last year, what he did as a true freshman in that scheme. But that was a different scheme. And some guys, they're only fits for certain schemes, right? And I think those two guys at 265 pounds, which is what Pollard is, and 280 pounds with Hewitt, playing in any other scheme other than the old Virginia Tech scheme is going to be difficult for those guys.
So one of the things this makes me think of is, when the University of Virginia was hiring coaches who were trying to compete with traditional styles of play, they were not successful in battling North Carolina and Duke in ACC basketball.
Right.
When they hired Tony Bennett, a different coach with a different system, and started recruiting to that system, that's when they got really successful and eventually won a national championship. And I read somebody made the comment, you're not going to out-recruit UNC and Duke. You need to learn to beat them a different way. So one of the things I worry about is if Tech is going to a more traditional scheme,
right,
then they're going to have to recruit for that scheme.
Right.
And some of the most rare athletes on the planet are those 6'2", 6'3", 300-pound plus defensive tackles who are athletic. There are not many of those guys. It's like the 125-pound class in wrestling. There just aren't that many grown men who weigh 125 pounds or less.
Right.
So these are guys that are hard to find, and so that's something to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and you can't just snap your fingers and say, "Oh, well, Virginia Tech should go back to that scheme." Nobody ran that besides the Bud Foster Charlie Wiles combination. Yeah. Nobody else can really coach that. Even Justin Hamilton. He played in it for 4 years, he only played in it 1 year. He was an offensive player.
He was an offensive guy until then, right?
Yeah, he played in it for 1 year, and then he spent more time in other defensive systems than he did Virginia Tech's.
Right.
I mean, he spent more time in the NFL, the Saban, the Nick Saban Belichick system.
Was that with the Browns?
Yeah. And then he played with the Redskins, and he's coached at several different places in college. So he has more experience in other schemes than he does Virginia Tech's.
Yeah.
So it's not like you could just snap your fingers and go out and hire somebody and just replicate that defense, because nobody else coaches that way. So this transition was going to happen at some point. Whether it was 2020, 2025, 2030, it was going to happen at some point.
And here it is.
Here we are.
So one last thing I have to say about that is, and we're starting to make these sort of comments, and the fans are starting to say on our message boards and starting to email us and say, what is the scheme? What do you see? And so I've tasked Brandon Patterson with.
Have you contacted him?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I emailed him last night and I said, fans are asking us for a description of the scheme, and so Brandon will either do that this week or as soon as he can. I'm not sure he's digested enough game film at this point to really kind of tell us what he sees. Yeah. He has made a comment about how the defensive ends aren't crashing down like they used to,
and that puts more pressure on the defensive tackles to hold up,
right? Because they're not getting that support from guys crashing down the line.
Right.
So we went on quite a while about that.
Nick.
When you give up 656 yards and 56 points, there's a lot to talk about.
An interesting stat brought by the one and only Diablo fan account for Virginia Tech points per game. You talked about Tyler Matheny and Diablo being out. With Diablo, since 2018, we have allowed 27.4 points per game. And the 3 games where we haven't had him, which was Duke, this game, and 2018 Notre Dame. Now, of course, UNC and Notre Dame are good.
Right.
We've given up 45.3 points without him in those 3 games.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Divine Diablo. And he should be back, right? Yeah.
Now what hasn't changed in the Tech defense or any defense is there's always going to be a free hitter, right? Because 10 guys can't block 11.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So UNC just time and time again got it in a situation where Matheny was the free hitter. And those guys are walk-ons for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you're never going to have a walk-on program like Virginia Tech used to have ever again because of the camp circuit these days.
Yeah.
And those guys don't slip through the cracks anymore. So when you play a walk-on these days, generally it's going to be a big drop-off. And he played well against Duke, but Duke didn't even know he was going to be playing until an hour before the game.
You could tell UNC knew it.
Right.
Now, I thought, yes, I saw him hesitate a few times, but for the most part, Tyler Matheny's brain worked just fine.
Yeah.
And early on, he got in and he made a couple tackles, and he's just not a guy that's going to be able to go an entire game against an offense like North Carolina's.
Right.
Yeah. I still have ultimate respect for him for turning down a full wrestling ride to UVA to walk on it.
No doubt.
Oh, see, that's a little bit of trivia
See,
I didn't know.
I knew he turned down a wrestling scholarship, but I didn't know it was to UVA.
Wow.
It was to UVA, so a little respect there.
The legend of Tyler Matheny grows.
It grows. So, yes, obviously coming in and dropping off with a walk-on there. We're going to cut to the Fisher Law Firm ad. We're going to take a quick break here for you as Malcolm will roll that ad.
All right, so when we come back, Malcolm, let's come back to me. All right. You ready? Are we live? Yeah. My mic's on.
Don't cuss.
Don't cuss. All right, many thanks to the Jonathan Fisher and the Fisher Law Firm for being the lead sponsor of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We also want to give a shout out to Tony Roby's Southeast Regional Training Center. We talk about that all the time, how important it is to Virginia Tech wrestling. And, we hope to have Tony on a podcast here soon. To my knowledge, the wrestling team still doesn't even have a schedule, but we're working on that, and we'll get him on here to kind of give a rundown of the team and how things look for this year. But to learn more about the Southeast Regional Training Center and to donate, visit southeastrtc.com. And yes, we will talk about these guys later on. All right. So, Nick, back to you.
All right. So the offense scored 45 points and had a boatload of yards. Besides the first quarter fiasco, was the offense really a huge
factor in the loss?
Finger at? Yeah. Could you really point your finger at?
So I have a lot to say about this, but I'll let Chris go first.
I mean, let's see. Rushed for 260, scored 45 points.
500 yards roughly?
Yeah.
Was it 499? Or?
6 of 14 on third down, which is pretty good. 1 time of possession, no turnovers. That should win pretty much any football game outside the Big 12, right? Or apparently the SEC these days with Alabama, Ole Miss.
That? Yeah, quite a weekend for the SEC.
Also.
And that could be a sign that defenses are just struggling this year because maybe they're just not in shape. How could they be in shape?
It's funny because usually in spring football the defenses are ahead of the offense. Mm-hmm. So if you had asked me going into this year, I would have said I think the defenses will be ahead of the offense.
Yeah, so
and it's the opposite.
What I might do for Inside the Numbers this week is actually look at the top 10 offenses in the country from last year, total yards, and look at the top 10 so far this year and see how it compares. Maybe I don't know, but at any rate, generally speaking, it did well enough to win. I mean, you can nitpick a few things here and there. I mean, you can nitpick Khalil Herbert's number of carries early in the game. That's certainly something that if I would have changed anything, that would have been it. The thing is, we can talk about what ifs for Virginia Tech's offense, and could they have scored more points? Yeah. UNC could have scored 75 if they could catch the ball. So even if Tech had played it perfectly, if UNC had played it perfectly, it still probably wouldn't have been enough, right? Yeah. It was just one of those Big 12 style games. But I am pleased with where the Tech offense is now with Hooker. I think I'm more comfortable with this team now actually than I was before because now I know who we are. I have a better understanding of who we are overall as a team.
See, I thought I was starting to know last week, but now we really know.
Now we really know. Right. I think Everybody understands now exactly where Burmeister is in the passing game, and that Hooker brings more overall balance. He makes the offense more balanced, and that's where you go with. Nobody had a lot of information on Burmeister, including the coaches.
Right.
I mean, he was a scout team quarterback last year. They didn't have him in spring practice because there was no spring practice. He missed a good chunk of the preseason due to COVID issues. Right? So it's not like they had a ton of information on him. So I thought the play calling was better under Hendon Hooker, but I also think Brad Cornelsen, he knows a lot more about Hendon Hooker because this is his fourth year with Hooker. But at any rate, I don't see any scenario where it's not going to be Hooker going forward. Fuente will probably come out in this press conference today and say, "Oh, well, we'll see how the week of practice goes," and blah blah blah. Ignore that. He's just talking to give BC something to think about. But I don't see any way that it's not Hendon Hooker. But Tech is going to score some points this year. They scored 45, 38, and 45, and that's with their starting quarterback playing one half of football.
No.
So we might see some shootouts this year.
I think that's the way things are trending. So I also think it's fair to pick some nits. I'll admit that everything I'm saying here on the podcast is stuff that's going to be in my article later today. So if you're a podcast watcher, sure, go check out the article, but you're going to hear a repeat of a lot of this stuff. So Dave Scarangella, who is active on Twitter, used to be active on our boards. Dave runs a blog that he calls sports blog, mainly sports blog that he calls Dullest District. And Dave beat me to writing up and posting what I'm about to say. You pointed out that Fuente knew how it was going to go with the Virginia Tech defense. I agree. Mm-hmm. I tried to be hopeful in our game preview, but what I was hoping actually was we knew Sam Howell wasn't in a rhythm yet. I was hoping that the Tech linebackers just weren't in a rhythm yet either, and that they would start to play better and be more of a factor. That's one of the things I was thinking. But back to the topic, there are a couple of things I'm going to pick nits with. You knew you needed to get off to a good start. Offensively, you needed to play to your strength and set the tone. So Virginia Tech wins the toss and they defer to the second half. And I don't think there's a head coach alive that will do anything but defer to the second half.
Algora.
So because what they don't want to do is they don't want to give up points at the end of the half and then have the other team have the ball at the beginning of the second half. Plus, they also want to, after making halftime adjustments, be the first team with the ball.
Right.
So that's perfectly normal to defer to the second half. But particularly in hindsight, I think it would have been a better strategy to take the football and line up with your nation's leading rusher at running back and your offensive line, which has been stellar so far this year, and say, here we come, try to stop us.
Right.
And instead, they let UNC take the ball first, and 11 plays, 75 yards, I think it was, and that was actually one of their more time-consuming
I was going to say, I'm surprised it took them 11 plays, right?
Yeah, but they figured, and the sideline reporter said that at this, when the Virginia Tech defense came off the field after that first UNC possession, Tech was shell-shocked. So you've made a giant mistake by letting UNC have the ball first and send your defense to the sideline with their butts whipped and their chins hanging. So you're down 7-0 already. And then what proceeded to happen for the rest of the first quarter was they came out and the first thing they did was hand the ball to Khalil Herbert. He runs for 5 yards. All right. So that's a good start. He didn't touch the ball for the rest of the quarter. And in the first half, Khalil Herbert, I believe, had 8 rushes for 33 yards. Braxton Burmeister ran the ball 11 times. And I think the majority of those were designed runs. I don't think they were read options. Plus, he threw 15 passes. So you've got Braxton Burmeister, and granted, he's the quarterback. He's controlling the football for 26 plays, while the nation's leading rusher is touching it 8 times, only once in the first quarter, which, oh, by the way, ended with you down 21-0. I just think that, I think it's fair to say that Brad Cornelsen probably overthought it.
Probably.
Man, dude, just line up and go after him, man. You know what your strength is. And from, I don't follow UNC closely. Apparently, they were missing a defensive tackle through contact.
They were missing a player on each level of defense.
So just play to your strength and go after him. You're missing Luke Tenuta, but you've got a good substitute. Other than that, you've got your starting offensive line and the best running back in the country. Just line up and go after him. So I think that was a mistake. And eventually they solved that mistake in the second half and scored 31 points, I believe.
Oh, gosh.
And had 300 yards of offense.
Right. Yeah.
Right? You know, they actually outscored UNC in the second half. And yes, UNC ended up kneeling down inside the 10-yard line. Now that said, I don't know. I think you can criticize strategy. I'm not sure you can criticize the play calling very much. There was a play, and you probably remember this early on, Chris. Burmeister throws downfield into what looks like triple coverage to James Mitchell.
I remember that play.
And it gets broken up.
They didn't show a replay of it, so.
So I went back and I watched that play. Mitchell snuck behind the defense, and he had them beat. He was 5 yards behind that defense. Mm-hmm. That play is Braxton Burmeister's fault.
Right.
He didn't throw into triple coverage. He threw to a wide-open James Mitchell and just left it way short. You cannot criticize Brad Cornelson on that play.
Right.
And as is typical with offensive and defensive failures, sometimes you can criticize strategy and play calling. Other times you can't. The players have to execute.
Yeah. And, it's like, I think at this point, after 15 years of having a legit reason of complaining about offensive coordinator, and that it's just a habit for the fan base. Right?
Yeah. Well, they're easy targets.
They're easy targets anyway, but we're just so used to doing it. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's hard to break. I'm dead serious. It's hard to break old habits, man. And even like this. Remember when Hooker first came in, like. It wasn't until his third drive that he started getting going, right?
Yeah.
He missed that early throw to Drake Dulius. It was just a perfect call, man.
That's a great call.
That was
Dulius
a great call,
open.
Great execution, except Hooker, it was just the timing was way
Throws
off.
it into the dirt, right.
Right. But at any rate, I think my only real complaint offensively, like, we've gotten off to a slow start. We got off to a slow start against Duke, and I don't think it was necessarily because it wasn't that we weren't trying to run the ball well against Duke. They just didn't do it very well for whatever reason.
At first.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously they eventually got going. So there has been a slow start offensively in 2 of the 3 games. So I guess, that's my nitpick. But ultimately, when you're scoring 45, 38, and 45, most of that with backup quarterbacks, then it's a fairly small nitpick. And I think we're going to be fine offensively. If we lose a game because of our offense this year, I'll be shocked.
It's a lot of pressures on the offense. In the same way that the pressure used to be on Bud Foster's defense.
Right. I mean, to beat UNC on Saturday, Tech would have had to score it on every single possession, which is impossible.
Well, particularly early on.
Right.
Now, so one thing I do want to give Fuente credit for is I think he has a knack for, not every time, but from time to time turning a game around that's out of hand.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
The 2016 ACC championship game was getting out of hand, and then he ran that fake punt, and then suddenly it evened out after that.
He's got a darn good special teams coach.
Yeah. And in this particular game, it was 42-17, and then Tech proceeds to score 20 points in 6 minutes to make it 42-37.
That was a gritty comeback attempt.
Well done, Nick. So we'll put on the hats and we'll talk about that.
Well played.
I thought one instance where Fuente completely outcoached Mac Brown and his staff, he sends Brian Johnson out there for the kickoff. Johnson's not the regular kickoff guy. Mac Brown's staff doesn't even see it. Now there's a coaching maxim that if you see something like that, if you're UNC and you notice the kicker isn't the regular kicker, you immediately call a timeout because something's up. Mm-hmm. And then Brian Johnson goes out there and just perfectly executes that onside kick, and that's coaching. That's coaching. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, man, Tech had a really good day on special teams. That play. 55-yard career long.
Right.
His 3 longest field goals in his career have come in losses.
Yeah.
The UVA game, the Kentucky game, and now this. But that guy's the real deal. at kicker and onside kicks, apparently.
What are we up to? 17 straight? 18?
Yeah, something like that. So those two plays in the pooch punt, I mean, Tech had a brilliant day on special teams, to be honest with you. And they had a pretty darn good day on offense. So they were really, really good in 2 of the 3 phases. But they
and like you said, 0 turnovers. So in a lot of ways, they maximized everything.
If you had told me before the game that, they would recover an onside kick in the third quarter, that they wouldn't commit a turnover, that they'd rush for 260 yards,
Brian Johnson would make a 55-yarder.
And Hendon Hooker would look as good as new after his first couple drives. I would have been like, man, we're going to win that game. That'll final score probably something like 41-31 or something like that. But I would have picked Tech to win it.
And it just didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
So
we talk about the debacle as if like we got truly blown out, but people need to go back and realize, it was only an 11-point loss to an 8th-ranked team in the country at UNC in the rain.
What year were you born?
2002.
2002.
2002. There you go.
There you go. And it actually really reminded me, and I tweeted this. I said, this really reminds me of the 2002 Tech Miami game, and it might end up being the same score.
And it did.
And sure enough, it was the exact same score. And it reminded you of that game, and that it was such a high-scoring, entertaining game, and Tech kept finding ways to stay in it against Miami, but you knew they had no chance to actually win the game, and that was kind of the same thing here. Like, I would have been blown away if Tech had, like, after a while, it just becomes evident that you're not going to be able to stop them from scoring a touchdown unless they drop a pass or screw it up somehow.
Gosh, it was shades of 2003 too, and that defense couldn't stop anybody.
Right, so it kind of reminded me of that game. It's just where you're watching and you're like, man, if I was a neutral fan, like if I'm a random fan that doesn't have a rooting interest in either one of these teams, I would be really entertained right now.
Yeah. So there were a couple of plays in that 2002 Miami game. I think Virginia Tech had a kickoff return, either for a touchdown or close to it.
It was Richard Johnson.
I think so.
Yeah.
He didn't quite. Richard didn't have the jets to make it all the way.
Grant Knoll came in and threw a touchdown pass when Randall got hit in a
my gosh.
in a play that these days the defender would have
Jonathan Vilma just jacked Brian Randall under the chin.
Put his helmet right there.
I think that's the only time in Brian Randall's career where he missed a play. They had to take him out.
Well, his chin was. I think they put stitches in his chin.
Oh, never mind. We need to talk to Brian one time and say, do you even remember the rest of that game? And then there was another play where, Miami was one of the best teams in college football at that point in time, like ever.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to get Ken Dorsey as Heisman moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they tried to do a throwback pass to him down on the goal line. And Willie Pyle picks it off and runs it like 99 yards for a touchdown. So it's 56-45, but it wasn't that close.
Right,
it was one play away from being 63-38.
Right.
And there wasn't anything like that in this game. But I agree with you. You just never felt like they were going to catch it.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to highlight Trey Turner a little bit. He's had at least one big or highlight play in the game, but overall his production's gone down since the last year.
Right.
Yeah.
What's going on with him?
I don't think he's really developed since his freshman year, to be honest with you. I know he's got some plantar fasciitis going on this year, so we've heard. But honestly, when he catches the ball and gets in the open field, he looks a little stronger this year. I mean, he's turned some big plays, like with the
early screen,
the jet sweep.
Yeah.
Had an early the screen the other day. He's made a couple plays down the field. But like last year, he's struggling to catch the football again. I mean, honestly, the first drive of the game, it ended because he dropped the ball.
It was not a well-thrown ball, but it was still
catchable. It was a college wide receiver makes.
And then Caleb Smith made a catch like that earlier on.
Oh, he made a much more difficult catch than that. Yeah. So, he had to turn a little bit, but so I don't think. I think Tavion Robinson's developed really well, but on the whole, I do not think Tech's wide receivers have developed particularly well since Holman Wiggins left and went to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And that I don't think like Jafar Williams is a bad wide receiver coach. I just think Holman Wiggins is exceptional, and you aren't. He's coaching at Alabama.
Well, he's coaching at Alabama,
Nick Saban wanted to hire him. He's probably exceptional, right?
Right.
So. And I don't think it's likely that with Virginia Tech's budget that they're going to hire back-to-back exceptional wide receiver coaches. There's just not that many of them anyway. And the ones that are available aren't going to coach for $175,000 or whatever we can pay them. So there was naturally going to be a drop off there, I think, and I think we've seen it.
Yep, not really a whole lot I can add to that. He has his moments, but in general, I don't think he looks as explosive. So I wonder what's going on.
He just looked. I think he. I don't know. That second half of his freshman year, he looked like the real deal.
Yeah, and the catch against UVA down on that.
Right, and he just looked like a guy who was going to develop into somebody really, really good, and he's just been the same player, though, ever since.
So I knew there was something Trey Turner related that I wanted to get into, and it was the touchdown. The touchdown was to him, correct? That was called back for illegal shift.
Negated his own touchdown.
Yeah. So we got in a discussion about that on Twitter last night, and Dan Orlovsky, the color analyst, actually did a good job talking about what happened there. He said, whenever you have two players in motion at the same time, they both have to be still for a second, at least a second. So if you go back and you watch that play, Turner goes in motion from the left side to the right, out in the slot. And instead of stopping and going still, he hops up and down. And while he's hopping up and down, I can't remember if the running back was Herbert or Blackshear.
I don't remember which.
But, Hooker did that little thing of motioning him over from the right to the left. So the running back goes from the right side of the quarterback to the left and then stops. And Turner's over here hopping up and down, and the ball gets snapped. And that's why that was called. It's one of those deals where it didn't violate the spirit of the rule, but it violated the letter of the rule. It wasn't as if both guys were in motion when the ball was snapped, or they did two at one time and one guy kept running. It wasn't egregious. That's the stuff it's designed to prevent. Trey was just hopping up and down in place, and that's a painful mistake for Trey to learn as a junior. When you go out there, be still. Well, the thing of moving the running back from one side to the other was not part of the motion. So yes, they did throw a second guy in there, probably unexpected, but still, he learned as a receiver, once you're done with your motion, go over there and plant and don't move in case they have to move a running back or something.
I watched him do it live. I saw him hopping up and down, and I'm like, they're about to throw a flag.
Yeah, and Fuente after the game, he said he said we knew it was going to be a flag, and he talked to Trey when Trey came over to the sideline, but he didn't chew him out or anything like that. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah, and that's a frustrating thing where you get a penalty for something you don't even really get an advantage for. I mean, did the Hokies really get an advantage on that play because Turner was jumping up and down?
Who was it that was a yard and
that play would have gone the same?
Who was it that was 2 yards downfield?
That was against Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
Oh gosh,
did they call that on Darisaw?
I don't remember who it was.
Yeah,
clear on the other side of the field, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
But I mean, like, the rules are in place. Right, and if you don't follow them, what's the point?
Rules,
what's the point of even having them, right?
And I think I don't recall. I think Virginia Tech scored on that drive anyway.
The thing is, if you,
it was a field goal.
And the thing about if you're a ref, like, you don't know the end result of the play yet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see the guy jumping up and down, that's a flag.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You might feel bad about that. They scored a touchdown, and they did deserve to score that touchdown. Man, I wish I'd kept my flag in my pocket. Yeah. You don't think about that. I mean, it's just you don't know what the end result of the play is going to be.
So that made it 35-17. If that had not been called back, it would have been 35-21. That's 4 points Virginia Tech would have had when they made it 42-37. They would not have gone for 2. They would have kicked the extra point, and it would have been tied. All else being equal.
Yeah.
It would have been tied at 42 at that point.
Huh?
Yeah, how about that?
Now,
would he have gone for the onside kick, though?
Probably. I think so. He was ready for that.
He's pooch punting on the first drive, and I think he was going to do whatever he could to steal possessions and things.
In the course of covering a team for years, you have your criticisms of them, but and certainly I have my criticisms of Justin Fuente, but his staff can coach. I think as far as pure football coaches, they're good coaches.
Oh, I've always said if you gave him 11 robots and somebody else 11 robots, his robots are going to win probably 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so overall offense looking really, really good, and like you said, you got to kind of start breaking the habit of blaming the offensive coordinator when we're actually finally starting to score points consistently. I think we're got time for some Facebook Live, or not Facebook Live questions anymore.
Yeah, not Facebook Live, YouTube. this
Twitter
time.
board questions. What do you got for us, Malcolm?
Excuse me. All right, we'll start with Joe Woodyard. Thoughts on a move to safety for Connor? He's got a solid speed and a great ability to tackle. Just seems whip is becoming nickel, and his coverage on a slot receiver just isn't there yet.
Yeah, I would agree with the fact that he's not good in coverage. I mean, he's never been good at it, but he's not having that great a year this year, even before Saturday. But again, we don't know how much of that is due to the whole scheme not being completely installed. Maybe he missed a bunch of time. Who knows? I can't think about moving him until I could figure out who would play nickel in his place. And I don't know who would be the guy who's best suited for that. If I was going to move Chamari Connor, though, I'd move him to backer. I mean, Tech needs a huge athleticism upgrade.
Do you know off the top of your head what size Chamari Connor is?
About 220.
Okay.
Nickel, look it up.
So not maybe certainly
215.
not a yeah. So he's
He's not huge, but I mean, like he's a much better athlete than Dax, and Dax isn't strong at the point of attack either. So to me, it's not a physical downgrade, even though he is smaller.
I think Connor. I got several thoughts running through my head. We've his best plays are when he blitzes off the edge.
No doubt.
And one of the things I've noticed on those plays is when he gets his hands on you, you're going down. He's got very strong hands.
Like you watch him and it's like that's horrible form, and then he just slings the guy down like he's nothing.
Yeah, and that's one of his good qualities. As far as I know, he's a pretty good open field tackler. I go back to the Alonzo Tweedy thing. Alonzo Tweedy was a phenomenally gifted football player. I remember Bud Foster one time called him a phenomenally gifted athlete. Bud Foster called him, he says he's faster than a scalded cat. And man, he could run, and his open field tackling ability was amazing.
Yeah.
And that's why he was a gunner.
Oh, yeah.
But he never fit anywhere on the defense. There was never a position that, number one, he was physically suited for, and number two, he could grasp and execute well.
Anthony Shagag was a really good player too, but he never had a position.
Yeah. And I don't want that to be Chamari Connor's story. He's got some skills, and I hope they can find a place for him. Everybody talks about the fact that he got ejected for targeting on Saturday, but he wasn't having a good game before.
He wasn't having a good game.
They had already started to go after him.
He was the low grader on defense, I believe, in the preliminary
for the time that he was.
I mean, UNC went after him from the very beginning, and he wasn't having a great year before that anyway. He's one of those guys. I think in the 1998 Virginia Tech defense, he's a dominant football player, absolutely dominant.
That guy as a whip in the mid-late 90s?
Right, or a rover, either one. I think it would have been awesome.
Yeah.
We'd be thinking of him like we think about Pearson Prelo or somebody like that. I mean, in that scheme, he would be great. Yeah. I don't know that, he doesn't have a 100% true, he's a perfect fit at that position in this modern age of football. Generally speaking, I would say most nickel roles would probably be his best fit. I certainly think, zone coverage is probably a little better for him, but I don't know. I would be tempted to take a look at him at backer at some point, maybe next spring. I would also be tempted to take a look at Austin Cannon at defensive tackle. Austin Cannon is a backup offensive guard. I think he's only played 6 snaps all year. He's 6'3", 330 pounds. Former walk-on, now a scholarship player. I'm not saying that I definitely think this would work, but if he's not going to actually get into the playing rotation on the offensive line, I would take a look at him at defensive tackle because we need one of those guys to be able to occupy a double team. And normally I'm always a guy who's position changes in the middle of the season. Yeah, it's not going to work, and it's not a good idea. It's never a good idea. It's a last resort. But it's 2020, and nothing about this year is a good idea. And ideally, yes, you do that. You experiment with that in the spring, of course. But there was no spring.
There was no
spring. So I'm not saying I wanted that to happen against Boston College, but I would try it. I would take a look at it in practice for a couple days, and if it didn't work, nobody'd ever know anything about it. But if it did, great.
Well, yeah, I hear you. You need a guy who can hold his ground and, allow a guy like Norrell Pollard and a guy like Gerard Hewitt to take some rest on the bench and keep their energy up.
And
it's tough for those guys.
God, keep some guys off Ashby.
Yeah. All right. Good question.
All right, from Eli Largent. What do you think the main problem the defense was having? Or what do you think was the main problem the defense was having?
I don't think there is a main problem.
Yeah.
I'll go back to my 10-minute answer earlier in the podcast. It's everything. It's
Saturday. It was everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's some guys not necessarily being a fit for this scheme. Some guys being out. I mean, they had to put a linebacker at Rover at one point. I mean, Alan Tisdale, who hasn't even practiced the position. I don't think the whole scheme's even installed, and how could it be with half the players out and the coaches missing time? So, I think it was just everything was wrong, and I think it was the perfect storm of a lot of things were. It's not like Tech went out and blew the doors off Duke defensively, right? I mean, they gave up 31 points to Duke.
And Chase Bryce was pretty bad.
Right. So the warning signs were there. And UNC had the talent to take advantage of it. Yeah. So it's probably going to be a fairly long year on defense. More shootouts than we're used to. But at the same time, like, outside of Clemson and maybe Miami, there's going to be nobody Tech faces that has as balanced an offense as the one they faced this past Saturday.
And we will cover Boston College later in the week.
Yes, we will.
And
hint, Boston College can't run the ball.
They have not been balanced so far, but they have an opportunity. I think they've got a running back that's 235 pounds. I can't remember how tall he is. He's at least 6 feet tall. And, so we'll see. Anyway, good question.
Kevin Siegel asks, do you think the targeting call on Chamari Connor was a mistake or just an unavoidable football move?
It was certainly an unavoidable football move. I mean, if he wanted to take him out, he did a bad job of it. If he actually wanted to take him out, he should have just gone ahead and used his head. But I mean, he hit him with his shoulder pad. So I do think it's just by the rule book, it's the right call. And it's an unfortunate situation for defenders. One of my friends played at Tech back in the 90s, and he told me one day, he was like, man, all of us back then would have got ejected these days.
Yes.
I mean, he was like, we were doing that on purpose back then.
Yeah.
They were just mean, you know.
It's just,
it's like, that's the right call, but by the rule book, but at the same time.
Well, my good friend Richie Davis, I think, summed it up very well in a text to me this morning. Richie said, the targeting call on Chamari Connors is why modern football sucks, period.
That's a fair
think that
point.
sums it up? I get all my best material from other people. I'm stealing from Dave Scarangella and Richie Davis.
All right, we'll do one more from James Reckling. Why did Hooker not start?
Oh.
No, I mean, I don't know. I think there's some things like, this isn't the first time that Hooker has been like dressing for games but not starting, right? Like, people said he wasn't healthy enough to play against Notre Dame last year, so they played Quincy Patterson, but he dressed for the game, right? So why would you dress for the game if you can't play? I don't know. I think, I don't know. He did look rusty early, and so it stands to reason that he looked rusty during practice and everything like that. But at any rate, I don't think it matters now. I mean, he's the starter from here on out.
Should be.
And I'm sure there's always some things there that, like, from a personal standpoint, that we don't know. Like he had a health issue a couple of weeks ago, right? And I think if you've read anything about COVID and football players and the things that are required and everything these days, you can probably take a reasonable guess as to what that issue was or what they thought it was. So
what they thought it was, probably some of the follow-up testing you do.
Right.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it can be scary, right? So it might also take certain players a while to get over that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I have to say about that.
Well, I will take the opportunity to tease the Virginia Tech coaching staff. This is the second season in a row where putting in Hendon Hooker appears to have, to me, you watch how the team was transformed when he started against Miami last year. It's like they planted their foot in the ground and they changed from that point on. And that's not all just Hendon Hooker. It was Justin Fuente also changing how he did things. You got to give him credit. And then you see the same thing happen on Saturday. And the thing I'm talking about is not only does the offense seem to function better, but something changes about the entire team. And yes, there were other guys involved. That was a 55-yard field goal by Brian Johnson and a great onside kick. But the defense, there for a short stretch, was more energetic and played better. And it just seems, with Hendon being in charge of the offense, at least in the case of Ryan Willis and now I think Braxton Burmeister, it seems to have an effect on the entire team.
I think Cornelson is good at adjusting his offense to whatever quarterback he has, but I definitely think he's most comfortable with Hooker when it comes to game planning and calling plays.
And so my teasing is, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Do you get it now? I think the team's better with Hendon Hooker at quarterback.
I'll also say that this has nothing to do with Hendon Hooker, but something you said that I've already forgotten, but it made me think of this. This had the potential to turn all Duke 2019. I mean, it was, and it didn't. Tech stayed. I mean, they didn't play well defensively. I mean, they lost the game by 11 points. They really didn't have a great chance to win the game, but I never felt like, Tech never mentally checked out of that game the other day. They never quit. They stayed in it mentally. They're fine right now. I mean, where you could, after that Duke game last year, you really had cause to question of whether they actually cared anymore. And this year, Like you think I'd be mad after losing the UNC, but I'm really not. I think their mental state is fine right now.
So to your point, everybody talks about Duke last year, but don't forget Pittsburgh in 2018, 52-22. Right. This game was headed down the 52-22 path.
Yeah.
And the Q word reared its ugly head after that Pitt game, and the Georgia Tech game. The 2018 Georgia Tech game where they just ran the same play over and over and over.
They didn't even run the triple option.
No, they just ran the quarterback sweep or whatever, just over and over, and just demolished Tech. And that's what it was looking like when it was 42-17, and it didn't unfold that way. And I think that's why I'll use this phrasing in my article today. When you look out on the ledge, there aren't a lot of Hokies standing out there today. Right. They were standing out there after the Duke game and the Pitt game and the Georgia Tech.
The offense is good enough now to keep up in games like that. It seems. So that certainly helps.
So Hendon Hooker quote to your point about he was asked about the team's comeback, and he said, and this is Hendon Hooker, "I'm very proud. I told everybody that I love them and I would give them the shirt off my back. This team is my family and we come in every day and put our heads down and work hard. That's all we can ask for. All of the quarterbacks show each other love and give each other tips as we come off the field. The rest of the team was in great spirits as well, and everybody was saying, let's go, let's make a run. Everybody was in great spirits. It was great." I don't think he's talking about after the game. I think he's talking about in-game, and that's important, and it's really important for the rest of the season, So I thought like it or not, some separation occurred Saturday, and that separation is between Virginia Tech. There was that, Chris and I, you talk about this all the time, that trying to figure out who that second tier of teams in the ACC is. Mm-hmm. You've got Clemson, and now I think Miami and UNC are underneath them. Right. And then it's still Virginia Tech in a group with Boston College and I left Notre Dame out. Yeah. Notre Dame's in there somewhere.
It's going to vary so much on a week-to-week basis. Notre Dame looked horrible against Florida State. How do they only beat Florida State by 16 points? Yeah, they should have beat Florida State by 50.
They were losing 17-14 mid-second quarter.
If they were a legitimate number 5 team in the country, they should beat Florida State by 50 points. Florida State is that bad. right? So, but and at the same time, like you just put Boston College and Virginia Tech in the same sentence.
Pitt.
I don't know. I mean, Boston College had it was a last-second field goal to beat Texas State, right? So they're not that good.
Yeah, and so
Pitt does one thing really well: stop the run,
play defense.
They don't do anything else.
Well, yeah.
It's
so I will toss this out there. The Louisville game is pretty far down the road.
Oh
but
God,
they got some scary guys on offense,
and they don't play a lick of defense. That game's going to be
that game
a blast.
could be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's right. But if you're watching Louisville and you're like, oh, they're terrible, Tech's going to smoke them. I don't know about that, man. They got some guys that can make plays.
If we might beat them 60-40, if you call that a smoking,
that'd be a lot of fun to watch. All right, so that's it, Malcolm. Any more?
That's it.
All right. So what do we got here, Nick? We're about an hour and 5 minutes in.
Not too terrible.
What'd you think? Were you sweaty or?
No, not at all.
So this is your first time sitting in the chair, right?
No, I did one earlier.
He did one.
Yeah,
in here
earlier over quarantine.
Yeah, he did one in here over quarantine, and then one online.
And then did the remote one, and I thought the remote one was terrible, man. Not you. I just hate doing.
He hates
remote
the setting.
Yeah, the audio was terrible, and you gotta sit around the table like this. So we were wearing the grit hats earlier. If you want to check out their gear, go to Tech Sideline and pull the more menu, and then our sponsors, and then they're down there. Like I've said, if you're on the desktop, their ads are plastered all over the place. I will do my best to remember to put the link to this. And on Thursday, I will be sporting some different gear you can get from Campus Emporium. So, and again, many thanks to Jonathan Fisher and Southeast Regional Training Center.
You're like a NASCAR driver at this point.
That's right, man. Well, so Jeb Burton and I trade texts, and I've been getting tips from him.
Oh, okay.
So what'd you think?
I feel pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
Feeling better.
So anything else you want to add before we sign off?
I guess Thursday we'll be previewing the BC game. Not sure if I'll be here or Evan.
We don't know if we'll have Evan back on Thursday or not.
A little tidbit: Phil Yurkovich, Boston College
quarterback.
He is now thrown for more yards than ever for BC football in the first 4 games with 1,181 yards.
Through 4 games, that's the most.
That's the most ever for BC football.
That's interesting.
Well, I know when they played UNC, they threw it 53 times and ran it 19 times. And that includes 3 sacks. So really, it was
56 times and 16 times.
So, and just the way I saw the way UNC attempted to stop the run against Virginia Tech on Saturday, I don't know if that was the right. But I go back and I say BC can't throw it, or excuse me, they can't run it. I mean, they don't even try to run it.
What if they try?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows? They don't practice it.
Yeah. Well, they do have a new coach, and so maybe that's that's not really the culture at BC.
It's not.
Yeah.
I guess because we can talk about that on Thursday.
Yeah. And Yurkovich is a Notre Dame transfer.
Yep.
And I didn't know if he was a grad transfer or what. He's actually pretty young. I think he's a redshirt sophomore.
Yeah.
So
have fun seeing him around too.
Yeah. I think he's a pretty good football player, and you're going to see him more than once.
So, yep. There's also a cool picture circulating. Herbert on his big touchdown. No, when he stiff-armed, you're 200% committed.
Great. Yeah,
he kind of hit him with this. It looks perfectly like the.
Well, I'm glad.
The Heisman. So just a little.
So who did that?
Little campaigning.
I'm glad they didn't get a picture of when the UNC defender pulled Herbert's pants down. That was a view of him that I never.
I didn't.
You didn't catch that part of it.
I did not catch.
Oh, I mean, Herbert's running, and the UNC guy just grabs him by the back of his pants, and Herbert. He kept going for like 2 or 3 yards, and eventually, like the UNC defender just pulled his pants down basically, and Herbert got up and was laughing, and all the players were having a good laugh of it in the middle of the game. I can't believe like nobody pointed that out on Twitter or got a screenshot of it or anything like that.
Khalil Herbert, by the way, is still the number 1 running back in the country in terms of yards per game. So they gotta keep that train rolling. But I think we kind of wore that topic out.
Yeah.
So have you got the sign off down? You ready to sign off?
I'm ready. If y'all are ready,
go for it.
So we moved on from North Carolina, and that whole game on Saturday. We'll move on to 8:00. on Saturday against Boston College. We'll preview that game Thursday. Thank you to all of our advertisements today, from our head honcho Will Stewart, managing editor Chris Coleman, the best producer in the USA, Malcolm Stewart, and me, your temporary podcast host, Nick Brown. We are signing off here from Tech Sideline Studio.